In the cursed woods of Wyrmwood, Eva and Lara seek refuge, but an old man warns them, not all who enter leave whole. When the Watcher rises from the storm, the true hunt begins. Some debts can only be paid in blood. There are forests, and then there's Wyrmwood. A frozen wasteland buried under endless layers of snow, where the trees lean close like they're whispering secrets to each other, dark, ancient secrets you're better off not knowing. The air here feels thick, almost heavy, as if even breathing is some kind of offense. Every step crunches loud against the snow, a reminder you're not supposed to be there. In Wyrmwood, time doesn't just pass, it freezes right along with the rivers and the bones of those who dared to stay too long. Through this nightmare landscape moved Eva Marlowe. A shadow among shadows, she dragged her tired body through the drifts, leaving nothing but shallow footprints and the heavy burden of her past. Eva wasn't some lost hiker. She was running from a life that had finally caught up with her. She knew better than anyone, no matter how far you go, your sins run faster. Bundled in a stolen coat, clutching a torn backpack against her chest, Eva had spent months slipping through forgotten towns and gas station bathrooms. She wasn't looking for a new life anymore, just a place to hide long enough to disappear. She thought this dead forest could bury her mistakes. But Wyrmwood didn't forgive. It remembered. And something inside it was already awake. Eva wasn't alone for long. As she stumbled deeper into Wyrmwood, the storm thinned just enough to reveal two more figures cutting their way through the endless white. Strangers. And out here, a stranger could be either salvation or something much worse. The first was Rick Holden, mid-30s, army jacket 2 sizes too big, the kind of guy who smelled like old cigarettes and bad decisions. Rick had that look, like he'd seen more bar fights than sunrises. He said he was headed north, same as Eva. Funny thing was, he never mentioned why. Trailing behind was Lara Green, barely 20, all nerves and wide, haunted eyes. She clutched a cracked phone like it was some kind of lifeline, even though everyone knew there was no signal out here. Lara didn't talk much, but her silence screamed louder than any words. Together, the three of them moved like ghosts, each step heavier than the last. Trust wasn't just scarce, it was dangerous. In Wyrmwood, trusting the wrong person could get you killed faster than the cold. Hours later, when the last light was bleeding out of the sky, they spotted it. A crooked, half-collapsed cabin, hiding between the twisted pines. From a distance, it looked abandoned, just another corpse swallowed by the forest. Desperation pushed them closer. Shelter was shelter, right? But as Rick shouldered open the groaning door, a voice sliced through the silence like a blade. "You shouldn't be here." There, in the shadows by the fireless hearth, stood an old man, skin like bark, eyes like broken glass. He hadn't come out of nowhere. He had been waiting. The cabin creaked around them, like the woods themselves were holding their breath. The old man didn't move at first. He just stared, sizing them up with those splintered glass eyes, as if he already knew the weight each of them carried. Finally, he spoke, his voice rough, like a shovel dragging through gravel. "You walk in cursed ground. This forest, it doesn't forget. And it doesn't forgive." Eva exchanged a quick glance with Rick, who just smirked, clearly unimpressed. Lara clutched her cracked phone even tighter, eyes darting to the door. The old man shuffled closer, the floor groaning under his boots. He told them about the Watcher of Wyrmwood, a spirit older than memory itself. A force born from blood spilled in betrayal, from every life taken out of greed or cruelty. A guardian, but not a merciful one. Those who entered the forest stained with sin would be judged, and devoured. Eva forced a laugh, but it came out brittle. Maybe it was the exhaustion, or maybe the way the wind outside seemed to howl louder as the old man spoke. "You think you can outrun what you did? The forest already knows." His words slithered into their ears, planting seeds of unease. For a moment, nobody breathed. Then Rick barked a laugh and clapped his hands once, loud enough to make Lara flinch. Crazy old coot. Ghost stories for lost hikers. Eva tried to chuckle along, but her heart wasn't in it. Because deep down, something about that cabin, and that warning, felt too real. and as they turned their backs on the old man, ready to leave the cabin behind, none of them noticed the thin smile curling across his weathered face. They had heard the warning, but ignoring it would cost them more than they could imagine. And the forest was already listening. The door of the cabin slammed shut behind them with a groan, swallowed instantly by the howling wind. Rick led the way, his boots crunching through the snow like he was daring the forest to stop him. Lara shuffled close behind, her eyes darting nervously to every shadow. Eva hesitated for a breath longer, casting one last glance at the crooked cabin behind them. The old man was still standing there in the doorway. Just watching. "Let's move, sweetheart, before you start hearing voices in the trees too," Rick called over his shoulder with a mocking grin. The path ahead wasn't really a path at all. Just a snarl of dying trees and ice-slick rocks, stretching into a mist that seemed to swallow the world whole. The deeper they walked, the colder it grew, not just in temperature, but in spirit. It was a cold that felt personal. At first, it was little things. Eva thought she saw something, a figure, move between the trees, but when she blinked, it was gone. Rick swore the compass he stole from some abandoned ranger station was spinning in wild circles. Lara, silent and pale, began muttering under her breath, clutching her useless phone like a rosary. Still, they pushed on. Pride, fear, stubbornness, pick your poison. They had all heard the warning, and decided it wasn't meant for them. But Wyrmwood wasn't a place of second chances. Every careless step was another stitch sewn into a noose they hadn't even realized was tightening. And deep beneath the frozen soil, something ancient stirred, patient, hungry, ready to deliver its final judgment. The deeper they wandered, the less the forest looked like a forest at all. The trees grew unnaturally close, twisted together like veins under sick flesh, their bare branches clawing at the sky. Every sound seemed to echo wrong, too loud, too close, even when no one was moving. The first real sign came with the birds. Or rather, the lack of them. Eva noticed it first, the absolute silence. No chirping, no caws, no rustle of wings. Only the ragged sound of their own breathing and the crunch of snow underfoot. It was a silence so complete it felt like it was pressing against their eardrums, squeezing tighter with every step. Then the trees started to shift. It wasn't obvious at first. Just a small movement out of the corner of an eye, the way shadows seemed to tilt when they shouldn't. But soon, even Rick couldn't deny it. Trees that had been 20 feet apart now loomed shoulder to shoulder, branches knitting into walls that forced them onto narrower and narrower paths. And then came the carcasses. At first, it was a single deer, half buried in the snow, its eyes wide open in frozen terror. Then a fox, twisted and broken like a child's forgotten toy. The further they walked, the more they found, a trail of death, like breadcrumbs, leading them somewhere they didn't want to go. Lara started to cry, soft and hopeless. Rick barked at her to shut up, but his voice cracked in a way that betrayed his own fear. Eva said nothing, but her hands trembled inside her pockets. Wyrmwood was alive. And it was angry. As night began to bleed across the sky again, the last sliver of hope bled out with it. Whatever was waiting ahead, it was no longer a question of if they would meet it. Only when. The storm came back with a vengeance. Snow slammed sideways against their faces, blinding and bitter, as the group staggered forward, no longer following a trail but simply surviving. Rick cursed under his breath, his anger barely masking the fear leaking through every step. They didn't see the thing at first. They heard it. A low, pulsing sound, like something enormous dragging itself across the frozen earth. Eva froze mid-step, heart jackhammering against her ribs. Rick squinted into the swirling white, reaching instinctively for the rusted knife tucked inside his coat. That's when it moved. Out of the blizzard, a shape emerged, towering, wrong, hunched over with limbs too long and a body that seemed stitched together from roots, bones, and agony itself. Where a face should have been, there was only a twisted mess of antlers and hollow darkness. Rick shouted and lunged forward, bravado breaking loose in a burst of panic. Bad mistake. The creature didn't hesitate. In one horrific sweep, it was on him. Rick's scream tore across the forest, high and raw, but it was cut off so fast it didn't feel real. Blood sprayed against the snow in an ugly arc, already freezing into crimson crystals before it even hit the ground. Eva and Lara could only watch, paralyzed by the sheer impossibility of what they were seeing. The thing, the guardian, the judge, didn't linger. It didn't need to. Rick's body hit the snow with a sickening thud, lifeless and light, as if the forest itself had drained him dry. And just like that, the creature melted back into the blizzard, leaving only silence and terror. Eva stumbled backward, her mind refusing to process. Lara dropped to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably now, her cries eaten by the storm. They had been warned. They had been judged. And the forest wasn't finished. Eva couldn't move. Rick's blood had barely soaked into the snow, and already the forest felt closer, like the trees had crept inward, leaning in to watch. Lara whimpered quietly, rocking back and forth in the snow, lost somewhere deep inside her own terror. But Eva still had fight left in her. She knew why she was here. And it wasn't random. She had spent months convincing herself that she was the victim, running from town to town, hiding from the life she smashed to pieces. The theft, the betrayal, the broken promises she left behind, she had buried them deep. But Wyrmwood wasn't fooled. It didn't care about excuses. It only cared about truth. The whispers started that night. Not voices exactly, more like feelings, pressing against her skin, seeping into her thoughts. Regret, guilt, shame. Memories she had tried to erase came clawing back, the screaming match with her sister, the final cruel words she had spat before slamming the door. The money she stole from the shelter fund. The people she hurt without ever looking back. Eva fell to her knees, fists buried in the snow, sobbing in a way she hadn't allowed herself in years. She finally understood. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was judgment. And running would no longer save her. Not from the forest. Not from herself. Somewhere deep in the blizzard, the Watcher stirred again, sensing the shift inside her. The real question wasn't whether she could escape. It was whether she deserved to. The storm shifted again, not easing, but changing, like the forest itself was holding its breath. And from that suffocating wall of white, the old man stepped back into their lives. Eva jerked to her feet, half expecting another horror. But it was him, the eremite from the cabin, hunched and wrapped in a threadbare cloak, the snow clinging stubbornly to his gnarled beard. He didn't waste time. He didn't offer comfort. You think you can outrun what you are? You cannot. But you might bargain with it. Eva stared at him, shivering from more than the cold. A bargain? With what? With the Watcher? With the forest itself? The old man told her of a ritual, an ancient and bitter thing, not a prayer, not a plea, but an offering. A confession laid bare to the bones, and a sacrifice made willingly. Only through absolute surrender, he said, could she maybe earn a sliver of mercy. The price, however, was cruel. Eva would have to admit every sin aloud, not to herself, but to the forest, and offer something irreplaceable, a memory, a piece of her soul, a part of her humanity that could never be reclaimed. Lara, pale and trembling, clung to Eva's side like a lost child. But even she seemed to understand, there would be no forgiveness without payment. The old man's eyes glinted with something between pity and contempt. Most who try, fail. The forest knows when you're lying, even to yourself. Then he turned and melted back into the storm, as if he had never been there at all. Eva was left with a choice heavier than the mountains around her. Confess and sacrifice, or continue running, knowing the Watcher would come for her next. And this time, there would be no second warnings. The night swallowed everything. There was no more path, no more landmarks, just a sea of endless white under a black, starless sky. Lara clung to Eva's coat like a ghost, her teeth chattering, her eyes wide and hollow. And then, the forest opened its jaws. The Watcher emerged from the mist not like a beast charging into battle, but like a verdict being read aloud. Its antlered silhouette towered against the storm, a figure carved from nightmare, its very presence warping the air around it. Eva stepped forward. The weight of the old man's words burned inside her. This was it, there would be no more running. Her heart slammed against her ribs, but her feet stayed rooted to the frozen earth. With trembling breath, Eva began to speak. She confessed every stolen dollar, every betrayal, every cruelty she had buried beneath years of denial. Her voice cracked, raw and unfiltered, each word ripped from the pit of her soul. She could feel the forest listening, its branches creaking like an ancient jury leaning closer. And then, through tears and frostbite, she made her offering. Her daughter's memory, the only pure thing she had left. She gave it up willingly, feeling the hole tear through her heart as the words left her lips. The Watcher didn't move. It didn't need to. The wind howled louder, wrapping Eva and Lara in a cocoon of cold and silence. For a moment, Eva thought it was over, that she would simply vanish into the snow, forgotten like all the others. But the Watcher lowered its head, almost in acknowledgement. And slowly, impossibly, it turned and melted back into the trees. Eva dropped to her knees, sobbing, not from victory, but from the hollow ache of survival. She had survived the judgment. But survival in Wyrmwood always came at a price. She had won her life. She had lost her past. The forest, satisfied, receded into the night. And for the first time in a long, long while, Wyrmwood was silent. Morning in Wyrmwood didn't come with golden light or birdsong. It came with a gray, sickly haze bleeding through the trees, as if the forest itself had only grudgingly allowed another day to exist. Eva sat in the snow, arms wrapped tightly around Lara, their bodies half buried in drifts. Her limbs screamed in protest, but she forced herself to move, to breathe, to live. Somehow, they had made it through the night. But something inside Eva had been carved out, a hollowness deeper than hunger, deeper than fear. She barely remembered her daughter's face anymore. The sacrifice was real. And it had left a scar nothing could heal. They stumbled through the thinning trees, following a narrow gap in the woods that hadn't been there before, a silent invitation to leave. No footprints marked their passage, it was as if the forest itself had erased all evidence of their ordeal. Hours later, they found a broken road. Rusty road signs leaned at crooked angles, and a burned-out truck lay in a ditch. But civilization, or at least the ruins of it, meant they were out. Free. Eva didn't speak. Lara didn't ask. Some things didn't need words. At the edge of the trees, Eva turned one last time. For a second, she thought she saw something move among the shadows, a flash of antlers, a glint of dark eyes watching, waiting. The forest was sleeping again. But it was never dead. Because Wyrmwood wasn't just a place. It was a judgment older than memory, colder than death, waiting patiently for the next soul foolish enough to think they could escape what they had done. And next time, it might be you. If you made it out of Wyrmwood with us, drop your thoughts in the comments, click on the liked button, and subscribe for more chilling stories waiting in the dark night. See you later.